The carriage stopped moving an hour before dawn, and Marigold Ashcombe knew, before she opened her eyes, that something had gone terribly wrong. The first sign was the silence, not the soft hush of a country lane at night, but the deeper, watchful quiet of a place where no one was meant to be welcome. The second sign was the smell: wet stone, pine resin, and something older beneath it, the cold mineral breath of a house that had not been warmed by laughter in a very long time. She sat up too quickly. Her traveling cloak slid from her shoulders, and the ivory paste pearls her stepmother had thrown at her chest the night before clattered into her lap like loose teeth. "You're awake, then?" The coachman's voice came through the small window with a graveled reluctance. "We're here, miss. Raven Holt." Marigold pressed her gloved hand to the carriage door, then let it fall. Raven Holt. She had heard the name only once in her life, and even then in a whisper. A nurse, years ago, crossing herself when the word slipped out. A house older than the kingdom, the woman had murmured. A house that ate its masters one by one. The current Duke, the one no one wanted, the one the Tan refused to name aloud at dinner, lived alone there with a single elderly steward, and, the rumor insisted, a portrait of his dead bride that no servant was permitted to dust. And her stepmother, 2 nights ago, had decided that this was where Marigold belonged. "You will go to him," Lady Ottilie Ashcombe had said, the candlelight flickering across the cruel sweetness of her smile. "He has written for a wife 3 years running, and not one decent family has answered. You, my dear, are decent enough to satisfy his pride, and disposable enough to satisfy mine. Your trunks will be ready by morning." It had not been a proposal. It had been a sentence. Marigold pushed open the carriage door. The cold met her like a hand pressed to her throat. Ravenholt rose before her in the half-light. Black towers veined with ivy, windows like closed eyelids, a courtyard of cracked flagstones where weeds had won decades ago. There was no welcome lantern, no groomsman, no torch, no servant, no living soul to receive a bride sent in the dark like a debt being paid. Only one figure, standing at the top of the entrance steps, motionless as the stone behind him. He had been watching the carriage, she realized, since it first appeared on the road. "Miss Ashcombe." His voice carried across the courtyard without effort, low and unhurried, the way a man speaks who has never had to raise his voice to be obeyed. "You are 17 minutes late. I had begun to hope you would not arrive." Her foot, halfway to the step, stopped in midair. She had imagined him many ways during the long ride north, a grotesque, a monster with a dragging gait. The whispers had given her so many shapes to fear that she had prepared herself for all of them. She had not prepared herself for this. He came down the steps slowly, and she saw him fully for the first time. Tall, lean, dressed in mourning black that had simply become the color he wore. His hair was the dark brown of wet bark. His face was severe, precise, neither cruel nor kind. The face of a man who had taught himself to feel nothing in public, because feeling something in public had once cost him too much. And down the left side of that face, from the edge of his temple to the hinge of his jaw, ran a thin silver scar. Not a wound made in battle, a wound made by something deliberate. Marigold realized she was staring and looked down too late. "Forgive me, Your Grace. The roads were—" "I know what the roads were. I have ridden them. I do not require explanations from women who have been delivered to me like cargo. Step down, please. The cold is cruel to the unwell, and you look unwell." "I am not unwell. You are pale, you are shivering, and your lips have gone the color of bone." "Step down, Miss Ashcombe." She stepped down. Her slippers, silk, useless, her stepmother's idea of a final humiliation, sank into a half-frozen puddle, and the ice water bit through to the skin. She did not flinch. She had been trained, since she was 9 years old, not to flinch in front of Lady Ottilie. The Duke of Ravenholt did not yet rate the privilege of seeing her startle. He noticed. She saw him notice. Something behind his eyes shifted by a fraction of a degree, and the tiny movement felt more dangerous than if he had shouted. "Your stepmother sent no chaperone," he said. It was not a question. "No, Your Grace. No lady's maid, no letter of introduction, no settlement, no dowry. Nothing but yourself, a single trunk, and a string of false pearls." Heat rose to her face. "How did you—" "I can hear them rattling in your hand, Miss Ashcombe. Real pearls do not rattle. They breathe. Your stepmother has sent me a girl with nothing, in the hope that I will be too proud to send her back and too desperate to refuse her. Tell me, did she at least permit you to know my name before she signed the contract?" "Aye." "Before you answer, consider whether you wish to lie to me on the first morning of your acquaintance. I am told it sets a precedent." Marigold lifted her chin. The cold had numbed her toes, but something else, smaller and more stubborn, was warming at the base of her ribs. "Your name is Cassian Hollowmere, Duke of Ravenholt. You were betrothed once to a girl whose name no one will speak. She died before the wedding. Society blamed you. Your own family blamed you. You write every spring asking for a wife, and every spring no respectable house replies. My stepmother believes you are desperate enough to take what no one else will give. That is what I know." The silence that followed was so complete, she heard a single rook stir in the bare elm beyond the gate. The Duke of Ravenholt looked at her for a long time. Then, very softly, he said, "She told you everything, except the part that matters." Behind him, somewhere inside the great dark house, a door opened. The figure who stepped through the doorway was not a servant. Marigold knew it instantly, by the cut of the woman's traveling cloak, the crispness of her bonnet ribbons, and the small, satisfied gleam in her eye that belonged exclusively to people who had come a long distance to enjoy someone else's misfortune. "Cassian, darling, you really must stop frightening your visitors on the step. It's very Gothic of you, but the poor child looks half dead." The Duke did not turn. "Lady Pentreath, I was not expecting you for another 2 days. No, dearest, you were not. That is rather the point of arrivals." The woman descended the steps with the brisk ease of someone who had walked them 1,000 times. She was perhaps 50, sharp-faced, handsome in a way that had nothing to do with softness, and she stopped in front of Marigold with the open curiosity of a buyer at market. "And this must be the Ashcombe girl. My, that explains the hour of arrival." "Ma'am." Marigold curtsied. The gesture pulled at the wet hem of her gown. "Don't ma'am me, child. I'm your aunt by marriage, twice removed, and I refuse to be old before breakfast." She lifted Marigold's chin with one gloved finger, examined the face presented to her, and gave a small, conclusive nod. "Pretty enough. Tired. Underfed. We can fix all 3 before luncheon. Cassian, why is she standing in a puddle?" She declined to step out of it. "Then carry her, you wretch." "I will not." "Then I will instruct the steward to do so, and the entire household will gossip about a duke who would not lift his own bride from a frost." For the first time since Marigold had set eyes on him, something almost like amusement crossed the Duke's face. It vanished before it had properly arrived. "Miss Ashcombe, will you walk into the house, please? My aunt is regrettably capable of carrying out her threats." Marigold walked. The great hall of Ravenholt swallowed her the moment she crossed the threshold. The ceilings vanished into shadow. The floor was dark slate, polished to a mirror by centuries of careful feet. 2 staircases curled up into the dimness like the horns of some enormous sleeping animal. There were no portraits, a house this old, this storied, and not a single ancestor watching from the walls. Only empty rectangles where frames had once hung, the wallpaper inside them a shade darker than the wallpaper around them. Someone had taken every picture down, recently enough that the dust had not yet caught up. "Don't stare, dear," Lady Pentreath murmured, sweeping past her. "He'll think you're cataloging. Where are? Later. Tea first. Tragedies always go down better with tea." A small, severe man in a steward's coat appeared from nowhere, took her sodden cloak with 2 fingers, as though it were a dead bird, and vanished again. Marigold was steered into a sitting room where a fire had been lit so recently the kindling still cracked. A tray of tea, already poured, waited on the low table, which meant Lady Pentreath had ordered it before Marigold had even stepped down, which meant Lady Pentreath had been waiting. Marigold sank into the offered chair and accepted the cup with hands she would not allow to tremble. Now, Lady Pentreath sat opposite, every line of her sharpened by firelight. "Let us speak plainly, child. Your stepmother sent you to be married within the fortnight. Yes? Yes. Without a settlement, without a chaperone, without as much as a letter to announce you. Yes. And you came willingly." The question struck a softer place than Marigold had expected. She set the cup down before she could spill it. "I came because the alternative she offered me was worse." Lady Pentreath's eyes did not soften, exactly, but something behind them adjusted, the way a gem adjusts when held to a different light. "Good. Then we have a place to begin." She turned in her chair. "Cassian, sit down. You are looming, and it is unbecoming in a host." The Duke had remained standing in the doorway. He stepped inside now, but did not sit. He went to the window instead, set one hand against the frame, and looked out at the courtyard where Marigold's empty carriage was just beginning to roll away. He spoke to the glass, not to either of them. "Send her back, Aunt." Marigold's breath stopped. "I beg your pardon?" Lady Pentreath said pleasantly. "Send her back to her stepmother. Tonight. With my apologies, my regrets, and a sum of money sufficient to ensure she is not punished for the failure. I will write the letter myself. Cassian, I will not have another one." His voice did not rise. That was the worst of it. "I will not have another young woman walk into this house and learn what walking into this house costs. I told you when you wrote. I told the solicitor when he wrote. I told her stepmother in the only reply I have ever sent. No more brides. The advertisements were not mine. The letters were not mine. Whoever has been sending them in my name has been sending them against my wishes for 3 years." He stopped. His knuckles had gone white against the window frame. Marigold rose to her feet. She did not remember deciding to. "Your Grace." He did not turn. "Your Grace, if you send me back tonight, my stepmother will not punish me. She will marry me before the week is out, to a man she has already chosen. His name is Mr. Bramwell Coke. He is 63 years old. He has buried 3 wives. The last one was found in the river behind his house, and the magistrate was paid not to ask why." The room went very, very still. The Duke turned from the window. "Say that again," he said. She said it again. She said it slowly, the way she had rehearsed it in the carriage, during the long northern hours, when she did not yet know whether she was being delivered to a monster or to a grave. "Mr. Bramwell Coke, 63, 3 wives. The 3rd was found in the river. The magistrate was paid. My stepmother accepted his offer for me on the 2nd of last month. She accepted yours on the 11th. She did not tell me about the second offer until she had already taken his money. Money, the Duke repeated. £2,000. He has been waiting since Michaelmas. If I am returned to her, she will deliver me to him within 3 days. He has the license already. How do you know all this? Because she told me. The night before, she sent me here. She said it would be a comfort to me, on the road, to know how much worse I had been spared. Lady Pentreath made a sound that was not quite a word, the small, involuntary noise a person makes when they have been struck without warning. She set down her tea. "Cassian," she said quietly. I heard her. Cassian. That is, I heard her, Aunt. He had not moved from the window, but the stillness of him had changed. It was no longer the stillness of stone. It was the stillness of a blade balanced upright on its tip. "Miss Ashcombe, look at me, please." Marigold lifted her eyes. "Is any part of what you have just said untrue? Any single part? A name, a sum, a date? Tell me now, and I will forgive it. Tell me later, and I will not. None of it is untrue, Your Grace. You can prove it. I have her letter to him. I took it from her writing desk before I left. It is sewn into the lining of my traveling case." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the room, and for the first time since she had stepped down into the puddle, he stood directly in front of her, close enough that she could see his eyes, which she had taken for gray in the courtyard, were in fact the deep bruised color of a winter sea. "Miss Ashcombe, I owe you an apology. Half an hour ago, I intended to send you back into the dark, to a woman who would have sold you to a murderer, and I intended to do it because I was tired and convinced that protecting myself was the same as protecting other people. It is not. I will not make that mistake again tonight." The room seemed, very faintly, to lean toward him. "You will not be sent back. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not by my hand, or my aunt's, or any servant in this house. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Good. Now sit down before you fall down. You have been standing in a wet gown for a quarter of an hour, and I am not entirely heartless yet." She sat. He did not. He turned to his aunt, and the next thing he said was so quiet Marigold almost missed it. "Alwyn." It was, she realized with a small jolt, his aunt's given name. The shift was deliberate. The shift was a door opening. "Yes, dear. How long can a woman remain in this house without being married to me before her reputation is past saving? 6 weeks, possibly 7 with imagination. And how long will it take you to write to every aunt, cousin, godmother, and schoolmistress you possess, and inform them that you are sponsoring your husband's distant relation, Miss Ashcombe of Wiltshire, for the spring season, under your roof, in your carriage, with your name attached?" Lady Pentreath's eyes brightened in a way Marigold did not entirely trust. 3 days. 4 if I am thorough. Be thorough. I am proposing a delay, nothing more. Miss Ashcombe will reside under your supervision in the Dower House. She will be presented as your protégée, not my fiancée. We will give her a season under your name. We will make her fashionable. We will make her seen. By the end of it, half the dowagers in the country will have invited her to their drawing rooms, and her stepmother will be unable to retrieve her without a public scandal. He turned back to Marigold. At the end of the season, you will be free. Free of your stepmother. Free of Mr. Coke. Free of this house if you wish it. You will have a name, an income arranged by my solicitor, and the choice of any decent man my aunt has put in your path. None of them will be me." The fire spat. Marigold heard her own voice say, "Why? Why what, Miss Ashcombe? Why are you doing this? An hour ago you intended to put me back into that carriage. Why now?" He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Because 11 years ago, a young woman walked into this house in a wet gown, and no one in it, not my father, not my aunt, not myself, was brave enough to recognize that she had also been delivered like cargo. We thought she had come willingly. We thought her family had blessed it. We were wrong about all of it. And by the time we discovered the truth, she was already— He stopped. The silver scar at his temple caught the firelight and didn't move. I will not be wrong twice in one lifetime. That is the whole of my reason. I make no claim on you. I want no claim on you. But while you are in my country, Miss Ashcombe, you will not be cargo. Marigold looked at the floor. I have conditions, she said. 3 of them. It is always 3 with women of spirit. Name them. She lifted her head. First, my stepmother is not to be told where I am until your aunt has secured my position. If she finds me before then, she will come for me, and I will not survive a second carriage ride in her company. Done. Second, when this season ends, I do not want a husband chosen for me. I want passage. To anywhere. A cottage, a companionship, a position as a governess in a country I have never seen. I have spent years being given to people. I would like, once, to be given to somewhere. For the first time, the Duke of Ravenholt smiled. It was a small, tired, astonished smile, and it did not survive longer than a heartbeat. But it had been there. Done. And the third? She held his gaze. You will tell me before the season ends, in your own words, not in rumor, not in whispers, not in the pieces my stepmother fed me, what really happened to the girl who came here. Not because society is owed it, not because I am owed it, because you are owed the chance to say it aloud to someone who has not already decided what to think. The fire cracked. Lady Pentreath set down her cup with a tiny, ringing chime. The Duke of Ravenholt looked at Marigold for a very long moment, and then he extended his hand, across the small distance between her chair and his. Miss Ashcombe, we have an agreement. She took his hand. His skin was warmer than the room had any right to allow. Outside, in the courtyard she could no longer see, the carriage that had brought her north was being unhitched for the night. And somewhere, in a writing desk 140 miles to the south, her stepmother was already beginning to wonder why no letter of confirmation had arrived. The dower house stood 1/4 of a mile from the main building, half hidden in a stand of beech trees. And it was the first thing Marigold had seen at Ravenholt that did not look as though it were trying to keep her out. It was small, by the standards of the estate. By the standards of Marigold's bedroom in her stepmother's house, it was a cathedral. Your bedroom is the second door on the left at the top of the stairs, Lady Pentreath said. The kitchen has been opened. The cook has been bullied. The fires have been lit in every room you might conceivably enter, because Cassian believes that cold floors are evidence of moral failing in a host. Are you hungry? Yes, you are. You are 17. You have not eaten since yesterday morning, and you are too well bred to admit it. Sit. Marigold sat. The drawing room was small, paneled in honey-colored wood, and full of objects clearly chosen by someone who had once been very young and very happy. A tortoise-shell writing slope, a pianoforte with its keys yellowed by use, a glass case of pinned butterflies, a child sampler framed, the words, Olwen Mary Hollowmere, aged 9. God bless this house worked carefully in faded pink silk. You stitched that, Marigold said, before she could stop herself. I did. Badly. My governess wept. It is not bad. It is appalling, child, and you are tired enough to be polite about it. Eat. A tray had appeared. There was bread still warm enough to steam when she broke it. Butter so pale it was nearly white. 2 boiled eggs, and a wedge of something dark and rich and full of dried fruit she would later learn was called Bara Brythe. She ate. Lady Pentreath watched her with the unhurried attention of a woman who had raised 3 sons, 2 daughters, and 1 nephew, and who knew the precise moment a hungry child stopped being hungry and started being human again. When the second egg was gone, Lady Pentreath spoke. "My nephew is not the man you have been told about." "I gathered, ma'am." "You have not gathered the half of it, and I do not propose to tell you the other half tonight, because some things must be earned, and some things must be waited for, and a girl with butter on her chin is in no condition to receive a confidence." Marigold reached for her napkin. "Don't." Lady Pentreath's voice was gentler than her words. "Don't tidy yourself, child. Not for me. Not in this room. There are 17 other rooms in your future where you will be required to be flawless. This one is not one of them." Marigold lowered the napkin slowly into her lap. She had not, she realized, been told to be untidy by anyone in her life. Not by her father, who had loved her, but had been fragile. Not by her mother, who had died too early to teach her anything but the color of her own hair. And certainly not by Lady Ottilie, who had once slapped her across the back of the hand for laughing too loudly at a joke Marigold could no longer recall. Something in her chest, which had been holding its breath since the carriage stopped at dawn, exhaled. "Why are you being kind to me? You have known me for 2 hours. I have known of you for considerably longer than that. Your stepmother and I share a modiste in London. Modistes, my dear, are the most accurate intelligence service in the kingdom. I have heard, in the last 3 years, that a Miss Ashcombe is too tall, too thin, too plain, too proud, too clever, too quiet, and too much trouble to be married to anyone of consequence. When a stepmother spreads that many varieties of slander about a single child, one of 2 things is true. Either the child is genuinely dreadful, or the stepmother is afraid of her. I came tonight to find out which. And which am I? I shall tell you in 6 weeks, when I have made the country fall in love with you, and your stepmother is too frightened to leave her drawing room. Now, to bed. The maid is called Bryony, and she has been told she is on no account to ask you any questions tonight." Marigold rose. At the door, she stopped, one hand on the frame, and turned back. "Lady Pentreath. Alwyn, child, in this house. Alwyn. Why did he take down the portraits? Every frame. Every one." The older woman looked at her for a long, considering moment, and the firelight made the lines around her eyes deeper than they had been a moment before. "That is one of the things you must wait for. But I will tell you this much, because you have asked it kindly. He did not take them down. She did. The night before she died. He has not put them back, because he does not yet know which of them she would have wanted returned." Marigold's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Good night, child." "Good night, Alwyn." She climbed the stairs. The maid called Bryony was indeed 15, with a freckled, anxious face and hands that shook slightly as she helped Marigold out of the wet gown. She did not ask any questions. She did, however, hum softly under her breath as she worked, a tune Marigold did not recognize, and the humming was the kindest sound she had heard in a year. The bed had been warmed with a brass pan. The sheets smelled of dried lavender and something older, beeswax perhaps, or the ghost of cedar. Marigold lay down in them and discovered, with a small shock, that she was no longer cold. Her last thought, before sleep took her, was of an empty rectangle on a wall, slightly darker than the wallpaper around it, and of a man with a silver scar standing in front of it in the dark, wondering every night for 11 years which face was meant to hang there. She woke to the sound of horses, 3 of them by the rhythm, moving fast up the graveled drive with the urgency of a message that did not intend to wait for breakfast. Marigold sat up. The light through her window was the thin, pearly gray of mid-morning. Bryony had left a fresh gown laid across the chair, a jug of warm water on the washstand, and a folded note on the pillow. Miss Ashcombe, when you are dressed, come to the small dining room of the main house. Do not hurry. Do not be afraid. Do, however, wear the green. Oh, the green gown wasn't Marigold's. It had appeared in her wardrobe overnight, and it fit her precisely. Bryony arranged her hair with the careful concentration of a girl who had been practicing on dolls, and was now, at last, allowed near a real head. The walk from the dower house to the main building was a 1/4 mile of beech trees and frost-stiffened grass. Halfway along it, a rook called once from the bare branches, and Marigold realized her hands were shaking. She made them stop. The small dining room was not small. It was simply smaller than the great hall, which was a different category of measurement. 3 people were already seated. The Duke at the head of the long table. He had not slept. She could see it in the set of his jaw, in the cup of black coffee that had gone cold at his elbow. Lady Pentreath, on his right, in a morning gown of dove gray, calm as a chess player. And on his left, a woman Marigold had never seen before in her life. She was perhaps 70. She was very small. Her hair was the color of pewter, drawn back so severely that it pulled the corners of her eyes upward, and she was dressed entirely in black, not the soft black of fashion, but the hard black of conviction. She was the sort of woman who entered rooms ahead of her own reputation. She did not rise when Marigold entered. She did not nod. She lifted a single lorgnette to one eye and inspected Marigold from the doorframe inward, the way a woman inspects a piece of cloth she suspects of being mismeasured. So, this is the girl. This is the girl, godmother, the Duke said very evenly. Miss Marigold Ashcombe. Miss Ashcombe, my godmother, the Dowager Marchioness of Renfell. Marigold curtsied. It was not the curtsy she had made on the steps the night before. It was the curtsy her mother had taught her before her mother died. The deep, square, country curtsy of a girl who had been raised among horses and gardens. The Dowager Marchioness lowered her lorgnette by 1 inch. She has been taught. By her mother, who is dead. Speak when spoken to, child. You looked at me as though you wished an answer, your ladyship. I gave one. I will not, in future, presume the same. The lorgnette went up again. Behind Marigold, Lady Pentreath made a small sound that might have been a cough or might have been a laugh, strangled in its infancy. Sit down, girl. Marigold sat. The chair drawn for her was directly opposite the Dowager. She was alone with the gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper had ridden 3 horses through the night to be here. You know why I have come. No, your ladyship. Don't lie to me, child. I am not lying. I have been in this house 8 hours. I know only that I was sent here against my will by a stepmother who intended to sell me to a man with 3 dead wives, and that the Duke of Ravenholt, for reasons I do not yet understand and have not yet earned, chose last night to refuse delivery. If you have come to congratulate him, you are early. If you have come to dissuade him, you are late. The Dowager set the lorgnette down. My godson told me at 3 o'clock this morning, by express rider, that he intended to give an unknown girl an entire London season under his aunt's name and his own protection. I have known him since he was an hour old. He has not asked a favor of me in 9 years. He has not invited me to this house in 7. He sent for me because he is afraid of what he is doing, and he wished to be talked out of it before he had time to change his mind. She lifted her eyes, finally, and they were the color of cold tea. I do not propose to talk him out of it. I propose to find out whether he is right. Right about what, your ladyship? Right that you are worth the trouble. The room stilled. Marigold thought of the things her mother would have said, the things her father would have said, before grief had emptied him, the things her stepmother had taught her to say, the soft, deflecting phrases, the small, careful lies that had kept her alive in a house that did not want her alive. She did not say any of them. I do not know whether I am worth the trouble. I am 17. I have never been allowed an opinion that was not approved in advance. I have never been to a ball. I have never owned a gown that was bought for me rather than handed down. I do not know whether I will charm your friends or disgrace them. I know only one thing about myself with certainty, and I will tell it to you now, because you have come a long way, and you are owed the truth. She set her hands flat on the tablecloth, palms down, the way a woman commits to a sentence she cannot take back. I will not lie in your nephew's house, not to him, not to you, not to society. If I am asked who I am, I will say I am Marigold Ashcombe of Wiltshire, that my mother is dead, that my father is broken, and that I am here because the world has not yet finished with me. If your friends find that unfashionable, your ladyship, then your friends are unfashionable, not I. The Dowager Marchioness of Renfell looked at her for a long, long time. Then she picked up her lorgnette, set it back into the velvet case beside her plate, and said, to no one in particular, "Alwyn, you may write the letters." Lady Pentreath, somewhere behind Marigold's right shoulder, exhaled. "Cassian," the Dowager added, still without looking at him, "if you ruin this child the way you ruined the last one, I will outlive you on purpose. Do you understand me?" "Yes, godmother." "Good. Now I want toast, and I want it hot, and I want it on a plate that has been warmed, because I am 72 and I am tired, and I have just ridden through 3 counties to save a girl I had not met yet." "Miss Ashcombe." "Yes, your ladyship. Do not make me sorry." "No, your ladyship." The Dowager nodded once. It was not approval. It was the word benediction, issued with the full authority of a woman who had buried 2 husbands and outlived a son, across a white tablecloth in a small dining room that was not small at all. In the courtyard, somewhere far away, a 4th horse arrived at a gallop, and the steward's voice, for the first time since Marigold had entered the house, was raised. The 4th rider had brought a letter. It was not from her stepmother. Her stepmother did not gallop letters. She sent them by the slowest available coach and expected them to arrive nonetheless, in the way that empresses expect weather. The seal, when the steward laid the letter beside the Duke's plate, was a small black wafer pressed with the impression of a wren in flight. "From the Marchioness's solicitor," the steward murmured, and withdrew. The Dowager glanced at the seal, and Marigold saw a small, fractional softening at the corners of her mouth that was not, in fact, softness. It was satisfaction. "Read it, Cassian." He did. He read it twice. The second time, he set it down on the cloth between them and pressed the back of his thumb very lightly against the silver scar at his temple. "Your stepmother," he said to Marigold, "wrote to Mr. Coke yesterday morning, before any letter could possibly have reached her from this house. She informed him that you had been delivered, that the Ravenholt match would not proceed past the inspection stage, and that he might expect his bride before the end of the week." Marigold's hand, holding the bone china teacup, did not shake. She set it down with deliberate care. She wrote it before she knew. She wrote it because she already knew what answer she intended me to give. The Dowager Marchioness rose. The room reorganized itself around it, as if a key piece had been lifted from a board. Miss Ashcombe, walk with my godson in the gallery for a quarter of an hour. Alwyn and I have correspondence to begin. Cassian, do not lecture her. Do not propose to her. Do not, on any account, apologize to her again. Yes, godmother. Go. They went. The long gallery of Ravenholt ran the entire eastern length of the main house, 3 stories above the ground, lit by a row of high-arched windows through which the December sun was attempting, without much success, to reach the floor. The walls were paneled in dark oak. There were no portraits here either, only the empty rectangles, smaller this time, more numerous. The Duke walked slowly. Marigold matched his pace. My godmother is fond of you. Your godmother is testing me. Yes, that is how she is fond of people. I am terrible at this. She glanced at him and discovered that he was almost smiling. The smile was held about an inch behind his face, as though he had not, in some time, been given permission to use it. Miss Ashcombe, we are walking in a gallery alone, which my aunt has arranged on purpose. May I ask that, in private at least? You call me Cassian. I propose efficiency, not intimacy. Cassian, Marigold. I did not give you leave. No, I beg it now. Granted. They walked another window in silence. The frost outside was beginning to lift from the lawn, and a single deer, very small at this distance, picked its way along the edge of the wood with the unhurried elegance of a creature that has not yet been hunted. Marigold, why did you ask last night about the portraits? She did not answer immediately. Because I have lived for 9 years in a house in which my mother's portrait was taken down, and I have learned the shape that an empty wall makes when something has been removed from it on purpose. The shape is the same in this house. I should not have spoken. He stopped walking. She stopped too. They were standing in front of the largest of the empty rectangles, a space perhaps 6 feet high and 4 feet across, the wallpaper inside it preserved in the deep, rich, undimmed green that the rest of the gallery had lost decades ago. Her name, he said, was Viola. The word arrived in the gallery like something carried in from a great distance and set down with care. Marigold did not move. She did not speak. Viola Trefilian. She was the eldest daughter of a Welsh baronet of no particular fortune and considerable kindness. Her family arranged her betrothal to me when she was 17. I was 22. I had met her once at a ball in Cheltenham, and I had liked her, the way one likes a song one has heard once and cannot quite remember. She came to this house in the April of my 23rd year, in a wet gown, in a borrowed carriage, in the rain, having traveled 3 days. She was very tired. She was very frightened. I did not see that she was frightened, because I was 22, and I had been told all my life that I was a man of perception, and a man who is told that often enough stops bothering to perceive. She was unwell within a week. She was dead within 3. The physician said it was a fever of the lungs. Her mother said, at the funeral, that it was the carriage. Her father said, 6 months later, in a letter I have kept, that it was me. He did not look at Marigold. He was looking at the green rectangle of preserved wallpaper. She did not die of me. The physicians were correct. Her lungs had been weak since childhood, and the journey had broken what was already breaking. But for years I believed her father, because I had not been kind enough to her in the 3 weeks I had her. I took every portrait of every Holomere down on the night of her funeral, because I could not bear to be looked at by my ancestors, and I have not put them back, because I have not yet decided which of them deserves to look at me again. He was silent for a moment. Then, very quietly, the scar is from her brother. 2 months after the funeral. He was 16. He had a riding crop, and an excellent reason. I did not raise my hand against him. He is, in fact, the man whose seal you saw at breakfast. He is now my godmother's solicitor and her ward, and the only friend I have in the world who has earned the right to dislike me. He does not any longer. He forgave me 4 years ago, in writing, for which I have never quite forgiven him. Marigold made herself breathe. Cassian. Yes. Thank you. For the third condition. You did not have to tell me yet. I had given you 6 weeks. You used 6 minutes. 6 minutes is what it took me to realize that you were the first person I had ever told who had not already decided what to think. Even I had decided, for years, and I was wrong. You alone of every soul I have spoken to about her had not yet made up your mind. I owed it to that. The deer on the lawn raised its head for a moment and looked, almost in their direction. Then it turned and stepped back into the wood and was gone. I'm not going to make up my mind today. No. I would like, if I may, to come into this gallery again. Not now. Not tomorrow. But in a week, perhaps. With a candle after dark, when the light is kinder to old wallpaper. I should like to see, by then, whether I can guess which face belongs in this rectangle. Not Iola's, the one above hers. The hollow mirror, who ought to have been the first to forgive you. The Duke of Ravenholt did not answer for a moment. When he did, he had taken 1 step back from the empty rectangle, and his voice was not entirely steady. It is the third one from the door, on the left. My grandmother. She was a very good woman, and she would have liked you. I have not, until this minute, been able to say that aloud. He cleared his throat. My aunt will be wanting us. We should go down. They went down. At the door of the gallery, Marigold paused and looked back once at the empty green rectangle. A piece of paper, folded very small, had been placed inside it, pressed into the lower corner of the frame's outline, almost invisible against the wallpaper. She had not noticed it in the brighter light. She noticed it now, only because the angle of her departure had changed. It had not been there an hour ago. She was certain. Marigold did not mention it. She closed the gallery door behind her and followed the Duke of Ravenholt down the wide oak stairs. But she had decided, by the second landing, that she would come back for it. Alone. That night. She did not go back for the paper that night. She tried. She rose at 2 in the morning, wrapped herself in the dressing gown Bryony had laid across the chair, and got as far as the dower house door before she understood that the lock had been turned from the outside. With the careful, deliberate click of someone who had decided that a 17-year-old girl, on her first night in a strange house, ought not to be allowed to wander the grounds in the dark. She returned to bed. She did not sleep. The paper waited 4 days. By the 4th day, there was no longer time to retrieve it, because the Dowager Marchioness of Renville had finished writing her letters, and the country had begun, with a speed that astonished even Lady Pentreath, to write back. By the morning of the 5th day, Marigold had been invited to 17 drawing rooms, 3 musical evenings, 2 private dinners, and, at the top of the pile, on heavier paper than the rest, sealed with deep blue wax, a card from the Marchioness of Hexham, requesting the honor of Miss Ashcombe's presence at a ball in 3 weeks' time. The Hexham ball, Lady Pentreath said, holding the card up to the morning light as though testing it for forgery, is the ball, child. Half the kingdom will be there. The other half will be claiming, by the end of the night, that they were. Why have we been invited? Because the Marchioness of Hexham is my godmother's youngest sister, and she has been written at twice in 3 days by a woman who has not asked her for a favor in 41 years. And we will go. Oh, child, we will arrive. The 3 weeks compressed into a single, long-held breath. Madame Vespasia Quill, a tiny, terrifying modiste who had been smuggled out of Paris during the Troubles and had never quite forgiven the Channel for being involved, was installed in the dower house with 3 apprentices and 4 trunks of fabric. She produced a length of midnight silk so deep it looked, in shadow, like wet ink, and so brilliant in candlelight that it looked like the surface of a slow river under stars. This, for the ball. Nothing else. Marigold did not argue. The Duke kept his distance for those 3 weeks. She saw him at meals. She saw him in the library, where she now read every evening because the Dowager had written that a girl who cannot quote Cowper at supper will be eaten alive by January. She saw him, once, from her bedroom window, riding out before dawn on a black horse, and the silver scar at his temple had caught the rising light, and she had stepped back from the window before he could turn his head. He did not call her Marigold again. Not once. The night of the Hexham ball arrived with a thin, clear cold and a sky full of unreasonable stars. Bryony did Marigold's hair in a low coronet, threaded through with 1 strand of seed pearls so fine they looked like frost. The midnight silk fell from her shoulders like water. The Dowager Marchioness, who had arrived from Renfell that afternoon, expressly to inspect the result, walked once around her without speaking, then once more, then said very quietly to Lady Pentreath, "Alwyn, we have done a wicked thing. They are going to remember her." In the carriage, Cassian Hollowmere did not look at her. The Hexham ball was held at a house called Tarnowen, a vast white building set on a low rise above its own lake, and the lake that night had been lit with floating lanterns, so that the approach to the front steps was a road of soft fire on dark water. Marigold pressed 1 gloved hand against the carriage window and found that her hand was steady. She had been preparing for 3 weeks to be afraid. She discovered, with a small, clean shock, that she was not. "Now," Lady Pentreath murmured as the carriage door was opened, "remember, you have nothing to prove. You have only to let them prove themselves to you." The footman handed her down. The midnight silk caught the lantern light and held it. Somewhere on the steps above, a young woman gasped and was hushed by her mother. Marigold walked up the steps on the Duke's arm. Inside, the house opened around them like a music box being wound. The Marchioness of Hexham, a small, white-haired woman with a face like a kind owl, received them at the head of the receiving line, took Marigold's hand in both of hers, and said, "My dear, Renfell has written to me about you twice, and I have known her since I was 9, and she has not done that since the coronation. Welcome. You will be quite safe in this house." It was a public statement. It traveled the length of the ballroom in under a minute. Marigold did not attempt to remember names. She heard her own name spoken in 3 different rooms before she had been in the building an hour. She heard the word Ravenholt spoken without lowering a voice for the first time, perhaps in a decade. She heard also, somewhere behind her left shoulder, a cool, clear voice say, "And does she know? About him? Does she know what he did?" And another voice, drier, older, answer, "She is standing in his aunt's gown at his godmother's invitation, Lady Sidney. I should imagine she knows considerably more than you do." Marigold did not turn her head. She filed the name Lady Sidonia away with cold precision. The first dance was a Lord Penharrow, a tall, awkward, kind young man who danced like a man counting in his head and did not stop apologizing for the entire length of the set, which charmed Marigold so completely that by the end of it, she had laughed twice more than she had laughed in any public room in 9 years. The second dance was a Lord Brisby. The third was a Mr. Ainsworth. The fourth was Cassian. He came for her without speaking. He bowed. He offered his hand. Marigold placed hers in it and discovered that her hand was no longer steady after all. "Breathe," he said quietly as he led her onto the floor. "I am breathing. You are not. You are performing the appearance of breathing. They are different actions." She laughed very softly. He almost smiled. The music began. Cassian's hand settled at her waist, and she felt, through 3 layers of midnight silk, the careful exact restraint of a man who had decided in advance how lightly he would touch her. "You are doing very well. I've been counting steps." "Stop. Look at me, then." Counting and looking are difficult to do at the same time. She looked at him. The silver scar at his temple was nearly invisible in the candlelight. His eyes, which she had taken for gray on the steps and for the bruised color of a winter sea in the firelight, were neither tonight. They were the color of a thing she did not have a word for, and she stopped looking for the word and let herself simply be looked at instead. She noticed that Lady Sidoni had stopped pretending to talk to her companion and was watching them with the still, unblinking attention of a creature deciding whether to strike. She noticed also that the Dowager Marchioness was watching Lady Sidoni, and she noticed, last, that Cassian Hollowmere had not stopped looking at her face since the music began. The waltz ended. He bowed. She curtsied. He led her back to Lady Pentreath at the edge of the floor. He did not leave her there. He stopped, half a step away, and said, quietly, only to her, "Marigold, do not, on any account, go out onto the eastern terrace tonight. Whatever anyone tells you, whoever asks you, promise me." "Why?" "Promise me." "I promise." He nodded once. Then he was gone. A footman appeared at her elbow with a folded note on a silver tray. "For Miss Ashcombe." She broke the seal. "If you wish to know what really happened to Iola Trefilin, come to the eastern terrace. Alone. At once. A friend." She did not go to the eastern terrace. She did 3 things, in this order, very fast, and she did them without showing on her face that she was doing anything at all. She folded the note in half. She turned to Lady Pentreath and asked, in a perfectly normal voice, where the ladies' retiring room might be found. Lady Pentreath, who had also been trained, gave directions in a perfectly normal voice and did not look at her face. Marigold walked. She did not go to the retiring room. She went past it and through a small side door that Lady Pentreath's directions had been arranged to make her notice, and into a narrow stone corridor lit by a single lamp, and at the end of that corridor she found the back door of the Marchioness of Hexham's private library. The Dowager Marchioness of Renfrew was waiting inside it. She was sitting in a wing chair beside a low fire, with a small glass of something amber in her hand, and she did not look surprised to see Marigold at all. "Show me the note, child." Marigold showed her. The Dowager read it once. She did not change expression. She set the glass down on the table beside her, with the small, precise click of a woman placing a piece on a board. "Lady Sidoni Vauclin. I had wondered when she would arrive. Sit down." "Your ladyship, sit down, child. We have a quarter of an hour before Olwen begins to hunt for you." Marigold sat. "Lady Sidoni is the youngest daughter of Lord Vauclin, who was my late husband's 3rd cousin, and a man I disliked thoroughly when he was alive, and have continued to dislike since his death. She is 23. She has been unmarried for 6 seasons, which in our world is a kind of injury that does not heal. She was, 10 years ago, expected to marry my godson. I beg your pardon? Speak when I have finished. 10 years ago, she was 13, and he was 23, and the arrangement had been made when she was an infant, by her father and his father, both now dead. It was quietly understood by everyone in 2 counties that when she came of age, the betrothal would be announced. It was not announced because in the April of her 13th year, My godson met Eola Treffelin at a ball in Cheltenham, and 3 months later, he wrote to Lord Vauclin and broke the understanding. He paid a very large sum to do it. Lord Vauclin accepted the sum because he was a man who accepted sums. But Lady Sidonie knew. She had been told from the cradle that she would be the Duchess of Ravenholt. She was 13 years old when she was told that she would not. The dowager picked up the glass again. She did not write the note. She does not write notes. She had it written by one of her admirers. There are still a few. And arranged for it to reach you precisely 15 minutes after you danced with him. The eastern terrace is empty. There is no friend on it. There will only be 3 or 4 young men of good family, drinking brandy in the cold, who will see Miss Ashcombe of Wiltshire emerge alone from a side door at a ball, and who will be asked tomorrow by their mothers whether the Ravenholt protégé was seen on a terrace in the dark without a chaperone. Yes, your ladyship. My godson knew the moment the note was delivered. He recognized the hand of the man who wrote it for her, and he calculated, in the time it took him to bow, that he had perhaps 30 seconds to warn you. He used them. I did obey. Yes, that is why you are here, child, and not on a terrace. Now listen, because I will not say this twice. The dowager set the glass down. My godson is in love with you. The fire moved. Do not interrupt me, child. The sentence is expensive. He is in love with you, and he doesn't yet know it. And the not knowing is the only thing keeping him alive, because the moment he knows it, he will try to send you away. He will try because he tried to love a girl once, and she died. And he has never been able to separate the loving from the killing in his own mind. But I cannot tell him so. His aunt cannot tell him so. His godmother cannot tell him so. The only person in the world who can is the second girl he has ever loved. And you are she, and you are 17, and you have known him for less than a fortnight. And I am sorry for the unfairness of this, but it is the unfairness that has been delivered to us. Marigold discovered that she was crying. She had not wept in 9 years. She had trained herself out of it the year her stepmother had arrived. She had forgotten the small, specific shock of warm water on a cold cheek. She wiped it with the back of her glove. The dowager pretended not to see. What do I do, your ladyship? You go back to the ballroom. You dance 2 more dances, not with him. You return to the dower house tonight, and you sleep if you can. And tomorrow, you do not say a word to him about any of this. You let him believe that you did not go to the terrace because you trusted him. Do you understand why? Because if he knows you told me he loves me, he will run. The dowager looked at her for a long moment. You are not 17, are you, child? You have been 17 on paper for some years, but no one has been 17 behind your eyes for a long time. No, your ladyship. I am sorry. Thank you, your ladyship. Go. Marigold went. Lady Pentreath found her in the corridor outside the retiring room 2 minutes later, took one look at her face, said nothing at all, and walked her back into the ballroom as though they had merely been engaged in the small private business that all women conduct at balls, and that no man has ever been given an account of. She danced 2 more dances. Lord Penharrow's brother, a Mr. Treverick. She did not look for Cassian. She had felt, the entire time she had been in the library, exactly where in the building he was. A small, steady weight at the edge of her awareness, like a hand placed flat against a door from the other side. The carriage home was silent. The Duke sat opposite her. He simply sat in the dark, with the lights of Tarnowen receding behind them, and looked at his own gloved hands in his lap as though he had only just noticed that he had hands. Halfway home, he said very quietly, "Thank you." For what? For trusting me. I have not been trusted in this fashion, in a very long time. I had forgotten what it weighs. She did not answer. She had been instructed not to. But she reached in the dark across the small space between the seats and laid 2 fingers very lightly against the back of his hand. Not a clasp, not a gesture, only the pressure of 2 fingers held there for the count of 3. And then she withdrew them and folded her hands in her lap and looked out of the window at the dark, passing fields. He did not move. He did not speak. He did not, for the rest of the ride home, look at his hands again. The letter arrived at Ravenholt at 11 o'clock the next morning. It was not from Lady Sidonie Vauclin. It was not from the magistrate. It was not from Mr. Bramwell Coke. It was from her stepmother. She knew it before the seal was broken, because the wax was the color of old blood, and the impression in the wax was the small, ugly Ashcombe crest. A hawk holding a fish, which her father had once told her was meant to symbolize providence, and which her stepmother had once told her, in a different mood, was meant to symbolize what you take, you keep. The Duke saw her face. You do not have to open it here. I would prefer to. Marigold. Cassian, please, here, with you. Now, or I will not open it at all, and that will be worse. He nodded. He did not leave the table. He did not look away. She broke the seal. My dear stepdaughter, Mr. Coke has been patient. He will not be patient much longer. I am informed that you appeared last night at the Hexham Ball, under the sponsorship of the Marchioness of Renfell, in a gown of midnight silk, and that you danced 4 sets, of which one was with His Grace. Lady Sidonie Vauclin, who has been a very good friend to me these past months, observed you the entire evening, and has very kindly written to me at length. You have been a foolish girl, Marigold. You were sent to Ravenholt to be inspected, not to be kept. You were sent because no decent house would have you. You have repaid my generosity by allowing yourself to be paraded about the country in another woman's silk, on the arm of a man who has been refused by every respectable family in the kingdom for 9 years. I have written to His Grace, to the Marchioness of Renfell, to the Marchioness of Hexham, and to Lady Pentreath. I have informed all 4 that you are a minor, that I am your legal guardian until the May of next year, and that you have left my house without my consent. I require you returned within 7 days, failing which I will apply to the magistrate for an order, and to certain newspapers for a very full and very sad account of how a young woman of unstable temperament was lured from her loving stepmother's home by a duke of unfortunate reputation. I am sorry it has come to this. You did this to yourself. Mr. Coke is a kind man, and an old friend of your late father, and a wife of his lives in the country, and is not required to attend balls. You will be quite happy in time. Most women are. Your devoted stepmother, Ottilie Ashcombe. Marigold set the letter down. She set it very flat on the white cloth, and she smoothed the fold with the side of her hand, and she discovered that the small, clean, cold thing she had felt in her chest since the carriage stopped at Ravenholt 11 days ago had finished assembling itself, and now had a shape, and that the shape was the shape of a decision. She rose from the table. Marigold. I'm going to write to her. Sit down. Cassian. I'm going to write to her, and I'm going to do it now, and I'm going to do it alone, because if I do it in this room, I will say things I do not have the right to say in your house. I will be back in an hour. Marigold. An hour. She left. She walked, not to the dower house, but to the long gallery, where the empty rectangles waited. She went straight to the largest rectangle, and took down from the lower corner of the frame's outline the small folded paper she had left there for 4 days. It was thicker, older, the color of cream that had stood overnight. The handwriting was a woman's. The ink was so faded that in places she had to tilt the paper toward the window to read. It was dated the 3rd of April, 11 years ago. To whoever finds this, and I pray, it is Cassian, and pray harder, it is not. I am not unwell. I am frightened. The journey was hard, but I am not ill from it. I am ill from the letter that came to my room last night, which was from my father, and which informed me that if I don't marry Cassian Hollowmere within the month, he will be unable to meet the debts that my brother has run up at Oxford, and we will lose the house. And my mother will not survive the closing of the house, and the responsibility for all of it will rest, my father has written, with me. I do not love Cassian. I like him. He is kind. He has not raised his voice to me once in 3 weeks, and I do not believe he is capable of it. I believe he could in time love me. I do not believe I could in time love him, because I am already in love with someone else, whose name I will not write here because I will not ruin him as I am about to ruin myself. If I am gone by the time you read this, Cassian, it was not your doing. It was not the carriage. It was not the cold. It was not your house. It was a choice I made on the 3rd night I slept beneath your roof, and a weakness in me that I do not expect you to understand, because you have never in your life been a weak man. Forgive my father. Forgive my brother. Forgive me if you can. I did not know how to live the life that had been written for me, and I did not have the courage you would have had in my place. I am leaving this where you will find it. Perhaps not for years. Perhaps not until you have learned to love someone else. When you take down the picture of me, look at the wallpaper behind the frame. If you have already learned, by then, that none of it was your fault, burn this without reading it. If you have not yet learned, read it, and then burn it, and then go and find the woman you have not yet met, and love her, and do not, Cassian, please, do not be afraid. Iola. Marigold sank, very slowly, until she was sitting on the gallery floor, with her back against the paneling beneath the empty rectangle. She did not weep. She was past weeping. She read the letter once more. Then she folded it, and held it against her chest with both hands, and she sat on the floor of the gallery for a very long time, while somewhere downstairs, the Duke of Ravenholt, who did not yet know that the only person who had ever been able to absolve him had absolved him in writing, and that the absolution had been waiting in his own house for a stranger to find, sat with her stepmother's letter on the white cloth, and did not move, and did not eat, and waited for her to come back. She did not come back in an hour. She was still upstairs when the second rider of the day arrived at Ravenholt, a man in the dark blue livery of the Wiltshire magistracy, with a sealed warrant in his bag, and a copy of an order that named Marigold Ashcombe, minor, and required her return to the custody of her legal guardian within 72 hours. The magistrate's man was named Mr. Halse. He was perhaps 50, plainly dressed, with the patient, unhurried face of a man who had spent his working life at other people's worst mornings and had ceased to find them interesting. He sat in the small dining room with his hat on his knee, and he refused tea, and he refused brandy, because he had been instructed by his employer that he was on official business and was to behave accordingly. Lady Pentreath had returned from the village just as he arrived, and when she understood what he carried in his bag, had dispatched a rider east to Renfell, a rider south to the Marchioness of Hexham, and a third rider, for reasons she did not at first explain, to a small village in the Welsh marches called Treffelin. The Duke read the warrant twice. He laid it on the table. Mr. Halsey, the order requires Miss Ashcombe's return within 72 hours. It does, Your Grace. The order does not specify the hour at which the 72 begins. It begins, Your Grace, upon the order being delivered. That is the law. It has been delivered to me. It has not been delivered to her. She is at present walking on the grounds. I do not propose to call her in. When she returns, I will inform her, and the 72 will begin." Mr. Halls looked at the Duke for a long, slow moment. "Your Grace, I have served warrants for 23 years. Your interpretation is, in my professional opinion, original. It is also, in my professional opinion, almost certainly correct. I will note the time of delivery in my book as the time at which Miss Ashcombe is informed of it. I will be in the village at the Black Hart Inn for as long as it takes you, Your Grace, to find her on the grounds. That is generous, Mr. Halls." "It is not, Your Grace. It is legal." He rose. He bowed. At the door, he paused, with his hat in his hand, and added, without looking at any of them, "I have a daughter, Your Grace. She is 16. I would be obliged if certain things were arranged before I am required to return." He left. Lady Pentreath crossed herself, which she had not done in Marigold's presence before, and went to find Marigold. She found her in the gallery, still sitting on the floor beneath the empty green rectangle, with Iola Trefiline's letter pressed flat against her chest, her cheeks dry, her eyes the eyes of a woman who had been, in the last hour, given 2 pieces of information that did not yet know how to live in the same body. "Child." "Alwyn." "What have you got there?" "A letter, from Iola, to Cassian, written the night before she died, hidden in the wallpaper. By her. 11 years ago." Lady Pentreath sat down on the gallery floor beside her, in a morning gown that had cost more than the dower house, and did not appear to notice that she had done it. "May I read it?" "Yes." She read it. She read it twice. When she had finished, she folded it once with the care of a woman folding linen for a christening, and handed it back to Marigold, and pressed both her hands flat on the gallery floor, and said, very quietly, "Oh, my dear girl. My stepmother has applied to the magistrate. The order is downstairs. I have 72 hours, less however many minutes Cassian can argue I have not yet been told about it. Yes. If I go back, I will marry Mr. Coke before the week is out. Yes. If I do not go back, my stepmother will pursue the order, and Cassian will be charged with abducting a minor, and the Hollowmere name, which has barely begun to be repaired, will be ruined, and so will my godmother's, and so will yours, and so will the Marchioness of Hexam's. Yes, there is no way out, Alwyn. There is one way out, child. Tell me." Lady Pentreath turned her head and looked at Marigold properly, and Marigold understood, with a small, clear shock, that the older woman had been waiting 11 days to say the thing she was about to say. "My nephew can marry you. Today. This afternoon. Before the 72 hours expire. Special license. The Marchioness of Hexam's chaplain can be at this house by 4 o'clock if a rider goes within the hour. Once you are married, you are no longer a minor in your stepmother's custody. You are a duchess. The order becomes waste paper. Your stepmother becomes the woman who tried to drag a Duchess of Ravenholt from her husband's house, and she will be ruined within a fortnight." Marigold was quiet a long time. "He will not do it." "He will, child, if you ask him. He will not do it, Alwyn, because he believes he killed the last girl who came here in a wet gown, and he has spent all this time arranging his life to make sure he never has the chance to do it again. If I ask him to marry me to save me from my stepmother, he will do it. Yes, he will. But he will do it the way a man stands in front of a horse he knows is going to kick him. He will do it as a sacrifice. And I will be married, for the rest of my life, to a man who believes he sacrificed himself for me. And I will know, every day of that life, that he never actually chose me. He only refused to be the man who let another girl be sold. Lady Pentreath was silent. "There is one way," Marigold said. "Tell me." "I will give him the letter. I will let him read it alone, and I will not be in the room when he reads it, because the only person who has the right to be in the room while a man learns that he did not kill someone is the man himself. I will wait downstairs, and if he comes to me after he has read it, and he asks me to marry him, not to save me, not to defy my stepmother, not to repair his name, but to marry him because she has, after all this time, given him permission to want something, then I will say yes, and I will mean it. We will not be marrying because of the 72 hours. We will be marrying in spite of them. And if he does not come, then I will go back, Alwyn. I will go back to Wiltshire, and I will marry Mr. Coke, and I will survive him as his other wives did not, because I have learned one thing in this house that they did not have time to learn, which is that there are women in the world like you, and like the Dowager, who write letters for girls they have not met. I will write to you. You will write back. I will outlive him. And then, when I am 25 and a widow and free, I will come back to this gallery, and I will see whether Cassian Hollowmere has put the portraits back up, and if he has, I will know I was right not to ask him to choose me before he had chosen himself. Lady Pentreath was, by this point, weeping silently. She had not made a sound. She did not appear to have noticed. "You are not 17, child. I have been told. Go and find him. I'm going." "Wait." Lady Pentreath reached into the small embroidered bag at her wrist and drew out a fold of tissue paper and unwrapped it on her lap. Inside was a ring. It was not a Hollowmere ring. It was older than the Hollowmeres. A small, plain, dark gold band, set with a single stone, the color of a river under cloud, the gold worn thin in one place where, for 50 years, a woman had run her thumb over it for comfort. This was my mother's. She wore it for the entirety of a 41-year marriage, in which she was, on at least 3 occasions, asked to choose between her husband and her own life, and on each occasion she chose correctly. I have never given it to anyone, child, because I have never met a girl I trusted to make the same choices. Take it. Do not give him the chance to buy you a new one. New ones are bought to apologize. Old ones are given to remember. Marigold took the ring. It was warm. She walked downstairs to find Cassian Hollowmere, and Eola Treffelin's letter was in one hand, and Olwen Pentreath's mother's ring was in the other, and the 72 hours had not yet, technically, begun. He was not in the breakfast room. He was not in the library. He was not in his study. She found him in the great hall. He was standing in front of one of the empty rectangles, not the largest, but a smaller one, near the western staircase. He had a candle in one hand, although it was not yet noon, and he was looking up at the rectangle, the way a man looks at something he has avoided for a very long time and has now run out of reasons to avoid. He did not turn when she entered. "Cassian. Marigold. I have something for you." "Yes. I rather thought you might." She stopped a few paces from him. "You knew it was there." "No. I knew something was there, because for years I have walked past that rectangle every morning and every evening, and I have known there was something in it I had not yet been brave enough to take down. I see now I was wrong about which direction the cowardice was facing. You have not read it. No. It is from her." "Yes," I gathered. "Would you have me read it alone?" "If you like." He looked at her. Then, for the first time since she had entered. "No, Marigold. I have read every important thing in my life alone. I would like, this once, to read something while a person who has not yet decided what to think of me is in the room. She held out the letter. He took it. He set the candle down. He broke open the small folded square. He read. She watched his face. She saw recognition, the small contracting of the muscles around the eyes. When a man recognizes a hand he has not seen in a very long time. She saw the slow drop of the shoulders by perhaps half an inch, the kind of drop a body makes when a weight that has been carried for so long is, without warning, lifted. She saw, when he reached the line about her choice, his free hand lift to the silver scar at his temple and rest there, not pressing, only resting, as though he were greeting it for the last time. He read the letter to the end. Then he read it again. Then he folded it very carefully, with hands that were not quite steady, and placed it on the side table beside the candle, and sat down, not in a chair, because there was no chair, but on the lowest step of the western staircase, with his elbows on his knees, and his hands hanging loose between them, and his head bent. He did not weep. He had emptied himself, long ago, of the kind of grief that produces tears, and what remained was a deeper, drier thing that had no language and required none. She crossed the great hall. She sat down on the step beside him. She did not touch him. She did not speak. She sat, with her hands folded in her lap, with the small dark gold ring closed in her right palm, and she waited. After a long time, he said, "She did not die because of me. No, she died in spite of me. Yes, I would have been kind to her, Marigold. I know. She would have been, in time, content. I believe she knew that, Cassian. That is why she could not stay. She could not bear to live a contented life with you while loving someone else. She thought it would be a small kind of theft from you that would last 40 years. She decided that one large theft from herself would be cleaner." That is a very Iola sentence. You did not know her? No. I read her once, in a letter, and I have a stepmother. Between the two, I have learned to recognize the kind of woman who would rather destroy herself than disappoint someone else. He laughed, once very softly, more breath than sound. "Marigold? Yes. There is a magistrate's order in my study. I know. Alwyn told me. There are 72 hours. I know. My aunt has, I am almost certain, already dispatched a rider for a chaplain. Yes, the Marchioness of Hexham's chaplain. 4 o'clock, she said. Of course she did." He turned his head and looked at her, and the morning light through the high windows of the great hall caught the silver scar at his temple, and did not, for once, make it look like a scar. It made it look like a small, careful seam, the sort of seam a tailor uses to hold together a coat that has been, against all reasonable expectation, repaired. Marigold. Yes, Cassian. I will not ask you to marry me to save you from your stepmother. I will not ask you to defy the order. I will not ask you, because my aunt has sent for a chaplain, or because my godmother will skin me with a butter knife if I do not, or because Lady Sidonie Vauclin will spend the rest of her life telling everyone in 3 counties that I refused you. I know. I would like to ask you to marry me, because a young woman wrote a letter 11 years ago in which she instructed me, in the kindest possible terms, to find the woman I had not yet met, and to love her, and not to be afraid. And I have been disobedient on every count of that instruction for all this time. I would like, very much, to begin obeying her. Marigold opened her hand. The ring, small, dark, warm, sat in her palm. She held it out to him. Alwyn told me to give you this. She said new ones are bought to apologize, and old ones are given to remember. I do not need an apology, Cassian. I would like very much to remember." He took the ring. He looked at it for a moment in his open palm, and she saw him recognize it, saw him understand whose it had been, and how long Alwyn Pentreath must have been carrying it in her embroidered bag, waiting to give it away. He took Marigold's left hand. He held it very carefully, the way a man holds something he has been told, all his life, that he does not deserve to hold. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit. "Marigold Ashcombe, will you do me the very great honor of marrying me at 4 o'clock this afternoon, in the great hall of a house I have hated for too many years, and propose, beginning today, to learn to live in?" "Yes, Cassian. Thank you. You are welcome." They sat on the step a little longer. After a while, she leaned her head, very lightly, against his shoulder. He had, she suspected, not been leaned against in a very long time. He learned how, in about a minute and a half, with the quiet competence of a man who had taught himself a great many difficult things alone. They were married at 4 o'clock. The Marchioness of Hexham's chaplain was indeed there. So was the Marchioness. So was the Dowager Marchioness of Renfell, who had ridden in from Renfell at a pace her physician would, she said cheerfully, certainly forbid. So was Alwyn Pentreath, in dove grey, holding a small handkerchief that she did not, in the end, use. So was Bryony, who wept openly. So was the steward, who did not. So was Mr. Halsa, the magistrate's man, who had returned at 3 from the Black Hart Inn, and who had, on being informed of the chaplain's arrival, removed his hat, put down his bag of warrants, and asked very politely whether he might be permitted to witness on the grounds that he had a daughter, and would like one day to tell her about a wedding he had failed to prevent. Lady Ottilie Ashcombe was, by sundown of the following day, ruined in 3 counties. Mr. Bramwell Coke was, by the end of the month, under quiet investigation by a different magistrate, one who had been written to, with great precision, by a Welsh baronet's son who had once, long before, struck a young duke with a riding crop, and who had spent the years since becoming the kind of solicitor who knew exactly which magistrate to write to. Lady Sidonie Vauclin was, in the spring, married to a perfectly pleasant baronet in Northumberland, and was reported, the following Christmas, to be tolerably happy, which is more, the dowager observed dryly, than she had ever deserved. The portraits in the great hall and the long gallery were not put back all at once. That was Marigold's idea. 1 a month on the first Sunday, beginning with the Hollowmere grandmother who would have liked her, in the order in which she and Cassian, walking together in the gallery in the evenings with a single candle, decided that a particular ancestor had earned the right to look at them again. It took them 9 years to finish. The largest rectangle, the deep, undimmed green one, was the very last. They did not put a portrait of Iola back in it. They put a small brass plate instead, with her name and her dates, and one line beneath them. She gave permission, and Marigold polished the plate herself every Sunday for the remainder of her life. If you are still here, and you are, because you are the kind of person who stays for the quiet ending, not the loud one, then thank you. Thank you for staying through the cold dawn, and the empty rectangles, and the 72 hours, and the letter in the wallpaper. Thank you for staying for the part where a girl decided, on a step in a great hall, that she would rather lose a man she had begun to love than receive him as a sacrifice. That is the story I keep coming back to when I write these. The story of women who choose to be loved properly. The story of men who learn that grief does not have to be a wall and scars do not have to be a verdict. The story of the aunts and godmothers and magistrates' clerks, the quiet people who write the letters and carry the rings and refuse, at the last possible moment, to deliver the warrant on time. If a particular line stayed with you, the letter in the wallpaper, the moment on the step, or she gave permission. Tell me, in the comments, which one? I read every one. If you would like another, the small button below this video costs you nothing and means a great deal. Subscribing tells the algorithm that quiet stories are wanted. I will keep writing them as long as you keep listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying for the seam, not just the wound. Good night.